You mentioned the convoluted politics of Austria at the time. What was it like being a performer of Jewish music?
Yeah, I was hoping we would go there because this was kind of an important part of my development there. Because, so Austria coming out of the war in the Waldheim era it was very repressed about Jewish themes. So when they would talk about Jews, sometimes they would talk about the Mosaic faith, das mosaische Glauben, or the other faith, the other. And so there was sometimes a very real underpinning of euphemisms that would be used to describe Jews, because to say the word Jude, Jew, just did not sound right to any Austrian, coming out of any Austrian's mouth. To say somebody was a Jew, it rang of der Jude, the ewige Jude, the wandering Jew, the dirty Jew, the whole thing. So it's really interesting that you have this kind of euphemistic culture that repressed it during the post-Holocaust years in the schools and such. You didn't get that much information. The archives were very difficult. It was difficult at that time during the 80s, for instance, just to get information. They opened up during the Waldheim. That was one of the positive things that happened, was this explosion of information came out during that, almost, ironically, because of the Waldheim thing, because there were people that were in Austria very anti-establishment. And so Jews were a representation of that anti-establishment thing. So younger people and people who were very critical of Austrian government and culture were sometimes drawn to Jewish culture. And among those people were professors and intellectuals who would then go to archives and research things and start to publish them. So a whole slew of things started to become published at that time. And what I think is important to say about this was that I, doing Jewish music at that time, got support from the government. So Austria is a very small country, and you can have actually almost personal contact with politicians there. So there's some nasty politicians, and then there's this whole level of politicians there that were interested in renewing or rejuvenating or supporting Jewish culture. And they had a socialist government there, the Red Party, that was Kreisky's party. And in Austria, those people, there were anti-Semites in that party, but there were also people that were not. And it was really interesting to me when I started getting government support for my groups and for my field work, that there was, like for instance, when you would get critiqued for your proposal, there would be anti-Semitic, like clearly anti-Semitic things in the critiques. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, really still? And then at the same time, there would be people that would be pushing to put a grant through. And when I started to have contact with those people, I realized that it was kind of an explosive thing to be working with Jewish themes in Austria, musical or otherwise. And things can very easily, quickly get politicized. And I remember the first grants that I got there, I was very uncomfortable with being trotted out as somebody who was, the symbolic Jew, the Paradejude, as they call them, parade Jews. And I didn't want that to happen. I didn't want to deal with politics on the stage. This was my perspective. Maybe it's very different from other musicians, especially, even here at Weimar. For instance, Alan can be very political. I didn't want politics to enter into this at all. I thought that the message of music was already clear. People that would come to the concerts were generally those people who really wanted to hear it, not anti-Semitic people. Maybe a couple of rubberneckers that were curious and anti-Semitic, but for the most part, I would say not. It was people that were interested and enjoyed the music. And to bring politics into this situation where people already knew their backgrounds, their family backgrounds. They had Nazis. Every family has a Nazi in there somewhere. All that stuff. This is already known. It's not something you need to say to people. It's like healing the healthy, So that's the way I felt about it. Maybe very different. It's maybe something that other people think continually needs to be said. But on the other hand, I didn't want to be presented as the nice Jew who played pretty music, and aren't Jews nice too? So it was that line that was difficult to do, because if you're going to, no matter what you do, there's a political element to it if you're playing in a place like that. But what was interesting was that when I communicated with the people in politics that were supporting this, I said to them, it's very uncomfortable for me for you to support me and put me on your banners and your brochures and posters and such. Is there any way we can work around that? And the people that I was working with for many years there would say, let's make an exception about this. We're not going to put our names on everything. So there was this kind of subliminal element that was there, that where there were people working with me for it. So this exists, and I think it was really important, because when I used to write on the Jewish music list on the internet, Ari Davido's thing, there were all these comments about playing Jewish music in German-speaking countries, and we shouldn't do it, and that there's this whole all these very heated discussions that happen. And here I was doing it. And I thought, no, maybe there are ways to do this, and there are people here that we should not be blaming, and we should be working together with them to do this. So that was I was lucky in that way to be able to get support while I was there. It wasn't the main way of supporting, because I gave concerts and workshops and everything else, but they gave a lot of tour support. I think altogether I got maybe 42 different grants when I was there. For different tours and projects that I was doing, which puts to shame the amount of grants that I get here in America for the same thing. So it's an interesting kind of aspect of Austrian culture that people may not know about. And I remember that I had been supported the year that I left Austria. I received a fax. This was fax machines then, from the foreign minister who was living in Bonn, Germany, and I had contact with her for many years, and she was very supportive. And she wrote to me. The first thing she did was she wrote, "Do you have any tours that you can do? We have some money left over." And I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll make one." Or do you have any expenses that you can have covered? Because if you don't spend the money, if the government doesn't spend the money at the end of the year, they get that much less money the next year. So the first person she turned to was me as a cultural attaché, and so I worked together with her. But then, shortly before I left, it was when the Blue Party came into coalition with the Red Party, and the Blue Party had neo-Nazis in it. I mean, it was the far right-wing party, and it was an ugly system. And they were forming so the Red Party, that was the one where I'd gotten support from, was in turmoil at that point, because this is the first time that a coalition government was being formed since the war. It was always a socialist government up to that point. And so they were up in arms. They were getting death threats and everything. And it was during this time that they had at the Haus der Kulturen der Welt, which is this big concert complex where Kennedy gave his Ich bin ein Berliner speech. They had a festival of world cultures, and every country was sending its representative person to play world music at this place. And we were chosen to do that as a Jewish group, which is so ironic, especially during the year, or not ironic, during the year of this coalition. They said to me, "Would you be this?" And I said, "That's a hard one, because, okay, who are we supporting? I mean, the Blue Party's coming in, and we're supposed to, will we be representing them?" And they said, "Yeah, this is the difficulty that we're having too. We want to send you out, obviously, as a representation of our liberalism, and our tolerance, as they call it." And so I said, "Okay, we have to lay some ground rules, because I want to support you. I want to support the good people in the government, but I certainly don't want to support this coalition." And So I said to them, I said, I want to do it. I want to support you, but if we could make clear how it's presented, that we're not in support of the current government, I would do that. And that's this. And I told them how I would want to answer to journalists to do that, and they agreed. And so we did the concert, and we did have journalists approach us in the back room. The first thing they said to us was, "Do you support the current government? Why are you here?" And I said to them, we don't support the current government. We support the government that has supported us, and these are specific people in the Red Party that have been able to support us through the years. That's what I support. Please print or have that be how you edit this statement, because that's as much as I want to say about it. And they didn't. They said that I was in support of the government. And so this was one of those situations where you get really angry at media, what they can do. So, but anyway, nothing happened after that. It wasn't like this was not a big event. We went out and we did our work and we came back home, and I left the country after that. Not for that reason, but anyway. So I've just given you the big view of what it was like there politically, as far as that goes. Other than that, the Austrians are very interested in, we had lovely audiences, never had any difficulties with, other than journalists giving weird radio interviews sometimes. But generally, it was a very supportive place. So maybe it might come as a surprise.